this presentation with a bit of a different experience background than some of the others who have presented here. My role with the ICRC is to foster inclusion and participation in society through sports for people with physical disabilities. The ICRC works through partners in many countries to deliver physical rehabilitation and orthopedic services for people with physical disabilities. And in recent years, we've started to build on that experience by delivering sport programs in some of these countries, which I've helped the ICRC to run. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the way we approach implementing sport programs in countries dealing with conflict and crisis, and how that can apply more generally to implementing humanitarian action that is inclusive of people with disabilities. So the first step that we take is that we reach out to people with disabilities. We identify the population and we reach out to people who might benefit from participation. The second thing we do is create an accessible space for the people to be able to participate from a physical perspective. And then the third is that we work to change perceptions, both within the community of people with disabilities and in the broader society as a whole, to make it seem normal or acceptable for them to participate in something like a sporting program. So these three moves toward inclusion also, I think, apply toward any sort of humanitarian action. So I'm going to talk a bit about how we approach each of these three and then how they apply more broadly. So reaching out to those who will benefit from these programs is something that the ICRC is well positioned to do. So because we either run or support physical rehabilitation programs in the countries where the ICRC works, we have a ready body of potential athletes that come through our doors because nearly every person with a physical disability, whether it is a result of an accident or birth or disease, ends up coming through the ICRC to receive necessary treatment, to receive aids for mobility or other therapy to help them get back into society. So as we pull these people together for sporting programs, so can humanitarian actors use similar approaches to pull people together from the disabled community to ensure that they are aware and prepared to deal with humanitarian crises. So whether we're dealing with something like sport, or whether we're dealing with protection, food delivery, water access, health, livelihood, or education, all these people with disabilities need to be found and informed of how they access these very critical components of humanitarian action. So it's important then for the humanitarian actors and governments in any context to be aware of where the people with disabilities are, how to contact them, and for the people with disabilities to be aware that they will be contacted and how to engage directly in the humanitarian action. So the second move that we take is to ensure accessibility. We need to create a physical environment that's accessible to people with physical disabilities in our case, and in the case of humanitarian actors, accessible to people with a variety of different disabilities. So it's necessary to do this in order to enable full and unrestricted participation in our programs, namely in sport, for anyone with impaired mobility. So that means ensuring that gymnasiums, pitches, and other sport facilities are accessible to people to come and practice or play in competitions. With humanitarian action, programs must be adapted to include people with disabilities, including humanitarian spaces and practices needing to be changed to guarantee accessibility for all, as described in Article 9 of the CRPD. Our third move is a change in perception about people with disabilities and their role in society. So one of the biggest challenges we face early in implementing sport programs for people with disabilities is that the society doesn't expect that they should be able to do something as outside the bounds of their very limited expectations as play a sport. And in many cases, this results in the individuals with disabilities themselves not believing that they can do something like this. So I'm going to give an example of an experience that I had directly when I worked with the ICRC in 2012 to implement a wheelchair basketball program for women. We ran into many of these challenges where we had a few people that we had identified as potential players, and they were interested in playing, but their families and their local communities were very reticent. The players themselves were reticent because they thought it would reflect poorly on their families if they were seen doing something so far outside the expectations of both women and women with disabilities as playing basketball. So we started by allowing them a safe space. We made a screen around the court where they would play so that they could play amongst themselves without anybody being able to see them. And this assuaged their fears in terms of the impact that it would have on their or their family's reputations. After about a year of playing this way behind the screens, they started to feel like this sport was part of their identity, and they started to feel like this is something they're excited about and they want to share. So they asked us to take the screens down. So since 2013, we have been allowing women to practice, play in tournaments in front of anyone who wants to come and watch. And now we have over 120 players, female players, across Afghanistan playing wheelchair basketball, participating in national tournaments twice each year, which have national media, local media, and hundreds of fans coming to watch them play. And as a result, we see a huge